It is the wedding issue here at Shutter Mag, and I decided to take this time to talk a little bit about second shooting. Reason being is second shooting is something pretty much all of us at one point or another do, and definitely something that I recommend experienced photographers still take the time to do. But when you're first starting out, there's a lot of things that just aren't so obvious. I know I have made my fair share of mistakes in the past when it comes to being a second shooter or even handling second shooters, and that is what I'm going to talk to you about. So when I first started as a photographer, I worked for another company, and when I was ready to start off on my own and venture out on my own, start my own company, do my own photography, I thought that I could build my portfolio based on all the pictures that I had taken working for the other company. This was just something that I thought, hey, I took these pictures, why wouldn't I be able to use them? But in reality, the other company really owned those pictures and I needed to ask permission before using them. That was a whoopsie on my end. Definitely made for a rocky end to my relationship with the company that I worked with, but hey, we've learned from it and you guys can hopefully learn from my mistakes as well. Secondly, sometimes we're an experienced photographer, but things on a wedding day don't always go so smoothly, and I had that happen once where I was working for a friend of mine, and through word vomit and snowball effect, just this horrible scene took place where we were being fed dinner at a reception hall, and granted, the dinner was legitimately 4 pieces of ravioli, and not the big kind, the small kind. And I complained about it and said, basically, how ridiculous is this? There's 4 pieces of ravioli, and this place has the nerve to charge the bride and groom, $100 for this vendor meal or whatever it was. Little did I know, standing next to me was one of the venue's wedding planners. I thought she was an independent wedding planner that would, share in our misery of not really being fed, but she actually worked for the hall. Whoops, I made not only myself look bad, but the photographer that I worked for as well, who unfortunately was trying to get on good terms with the hall so they would recommend her. Finally, one of the last kind of mistakes I've done in regarding second shooters is being a primary shooter and not giving the grace that I needed to a second shooter who made an amateur mistake. I had a shooter working for me and it was my fault. I didn't tell her where the wedding was. It is in the tri-state area around where I am, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, but for her, she lived a bit up north and this was a bit down south. So when I finally gave her the schedule before the wedding, she decided to tell me she wasn't going to work and called out 3 days before the wedding. You guys know as primary shooters, this is like the things that nightmares are made of for wedding photographers, not having that second shooter and having them call out right beforehand. And it wasn't even because she was sick or someone had died, it was just because she didn't want to drive that far. So I was furious, and instead of giving her the grace of, she doesn't understand quite yet exactly what this means and the kind of stress that causes to a photographer, I definitely kind of ripped her a new one and told her it was the most unprofessional example that I had seen in a while. Regardless, that was probably something that I could have extended a little bit more grace to. I did find a second shooter, no worries, problem solved, and hopefully now this one girl is an experienced photographer. She can show some grace after understanding now my position, can show grace to any photographers doing the same to her, though hopefully they won't. But just a few quick examples of second shooting experiences that I had, but hopefully you can learn from my mistakes, along with all the tips that I gave you guys in the article. I will see you next month here in Shutter Mag.